I arrived to Tijuana in the summer of 1983. I was inhabiting a unique extreme contradiction in which all the abstract neoliberal economic policies were fully materialized in space. In Tijuana, you did not need a PhD in economics to understand all of these abstractions. All you needed to do was open your eyes to the urban dynamics at play, to comprehend far deeper than with books the implications of neoliberal capitalism and its social, economic, environmental, and political consequences. Now that I have read through most of Marx, I still find two short paragraphs in chapter 25 of Capital Volume 1 to speak to me the most from his vast body of work. The intimate connection between the pangs of hunger of the most industrious layers of the working class and the extravagant consumption, coarse or refined, of the rich, for which capitalist accumulation is the basis, reveals itself only when the economic laws are known. It is otherwise with the housing of the poor. Every unprejudiced observer sees that the greater decentralization of the means of production, the greater is the corresponding heaping together of the laborers within a given space. That therefore, the swifter capitalist accumulation, the more miserable are the dwellings of the working people. I confess that I got chills the first time I read this. Fully resonated with my life as an unprejudiced observer in Tijuana. It was when I thoroughly comprehended what Marx meant when he wrote, "It is otherwise with the housing of the poor," that I realized that cities were the material mirror of capitalism, that urbanization was the living text of inequality, and that I could understand and predict capitalist dynamics by learning how to read this text, meticulously observing how macroeconomic abstractions had a clear and tangible physical representation in the spaces I inhabited. Cities as dynamic spatial constructions are the key to visualizing and fully comprehending capitalism's life-sucking and self-destructive complexities. Hence, the production of clear and tangible physical ruptures and frictions to capitalist manifestations in cities can, in reverse, turn into macroeconomic abstractions, and ultimately be the key to visualizing the material space of the anti-capitalist revolution to come, the urban revolution. After deciphering this, Tijuana was no longer the ugly, poor, violent, and unfortunate city by the American border. Tijuana was the material text of decades of American imperial impositions, of vicious neoliberal treaties, of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, of labor flexibilization, of industrial deregulation policies, of unfettered foreign direct investment, and of the pernicious privatization of natural resources, public infrastructures, and land. In short, it was for me the ultimate 4D visualization of capital. Okay, let me illustrate further what I mean by the 4D visualization. With this newly learned dialectical lens, I could read that the abrupt appearance of slums was the result of mass migration, on one side triggered by the economic crisis, but on the other provoked by the privatization of rural lands and the foreign-backed technological investments in agriculture that left thousands of farmers without a means of subsistence. Inner cities had high levels of unemployment, and the new job sources were in the maquiladoras that were stationed in the newly designated tax-free zones of border cities like Tijuana, where American companies could outsource manufacturing jobs to a place they didn't have to comply with strict labor, zoning, and environmental regulations, where building was cheap, where they didn't have to pay living wages or employment benefits, where workers were vast and disposable, where they didn't have to worry about high insurance premiums, and where they didn't have to pay taxes. In short, where they could expand their production output for pennies on the dollar and make more profit. Most of the slums that appeared when I was living in Tijuana surrounded these fenced-off, police-protected, tax-free manufacturing zones rife with maquiladoras. Workers from all pueblos in Mexico migrated in waves with no money and no means of transportation, looking for a piece of land to settle where they could walk to their new American-owned spaces of exploitation. The slums hit this text, and through this dialectical and anti-capitalist lens, I could read through the injustices that produced them. Over time, I learned to read every spatial and material text I could find in the urbanization of Tijuana. And as you can imagine, it immediately became inevitable to expand to new territories and interpret the texts of other urban regions across the world. For this, I want to stress that if capitalism operates at a planetary scale, urbanization has to be read as a planetary phenomenon that is produced when capital tries to materialize its abstractions, when it places them in our material world. And although it may sound contradictory, the scale of urbanization is not the scale defined by the political or physical boundaries of cities. Under capitalism, urbanization is a borderless process that produces variations of expropriated and exploited population, concentrated at the service of surplus accumulation. And these concentrations are what we call cities.